Chapter 1 of Island of the Blue Dolphins begins with a girl named Corona and her brother Ramo. They both went to Coral Cove to gather roots. A ship came closer and closer until it landed. The person on the ship was Captain Orlov. This is when the trouble really begins.
In Chapter 2 of Island of the Blue Dolphins, Captain Orlov and his Aleut hunters moved to the island. At that time, Corona was explaining how the island looked like a dolphin on its side. That afternoon, Ulop claimed she had seen a girl Aleut, but no one had believed her, so she collected fish and had seen 14 white bass in a hole at the reef. The next morning, the Aleuts asked if they could have some, but Ulop's father said he had none to spare.
In Chapter 3 of the Island of the Blue Dolphins, the Aleuts hunted for many days. Otter were slain by the Aleuts. Corona asked her father when would they leave. He said once they're gone, they will come back in the future. The people of the Island of the Blue Dolphins got scared that Captain Orlov would leave the island with all the pellets. So then they had jobs taking turns to watch the Aleuts.
In Chapter 4 of Island of the Blue Dolphins, the Aleuts were leaving on a sunless day. Coming from the north, deep waves rolled, crashed, and splashed. They had to get off the Island of the Blue Dolphins before the weather got worse. When they started packing, they took the otter skin, and in return they would give the village of Galisat good things, but they did not give them anything. And as a result, there was a war that broke out on Coral Cove. Many soldiers got hurt that day, including Chief Chowing, who had died.
In Chapter 5 of Island of the Blue Dolphins, there was a very bad winter and autumn. After the fight of the Aleuts, only 42 men survived the fight. Women like Corona's sister, Ulop, had to do men's work because there was no men left in the tribe. And Ulop took her mother's place after her death, so now she's doing the women's work. So later in the spring, Kimki called the tribe together. He said he would go to the East Country to get a new land for them.
In Chapter 6 of Island of the Blue Dolphins, spring has gone by and Kimki has not returned. Matasape has taken Kimki's place. The village is running out of water, but Matasape is focusing on the Aleuts instead of the water problem. Matasape sent people to look for the Aleuts' red sails. Matasape's plan was that if the Aleuts came, they would go to Santa Catalina. They hid canoes and supplies on the island. One night, a watcher saw a ship. They thought it was the Aleut ship, but it wasn't. They thought it had red sails, but it didn't. Then Nanko came. He said Kimki sent that ship to tell everyone to go to the mainland. Some people were happy, some people were not.
In Chapter 7 of Island of the Blue Dolphins, Corona's family are packing up to go to the East Country. Corona is bringing a knife made out of wood, a box of shell, and earrings. She is going down to the mesa, and when she finally gets on the boat, she doesn't see Ramo. Then finally she sees him. Ramo is on the shore. She pleads Matasape to go back, but he says no. So she jumps off the boat, and then she reaches the shore, but not enough to swim, and so she finds him.
In Chapter 8 of Island of the Blue Dolphins, Corona and Ramo are traveling to the village. When they arrive, they see that the pack has come and taken most of the food. They wonder if the ship will come back. Ramo hopes it does not. They look for food, but they cannot find much. The next day, they gathered food. Ramo thinks he should be the chief. Ramo wants to get a canoe and paddle it back to Coral Cove. Corona knows that he is not strong enough and tells him it will be too heavy. The next day, Corona woke up and Ramo wasn't there. Corona knew that if he did get the canoe in the water and made it to Coral Cove, he would be there by the afternoon. After a while, she looked out and sea and saw no sign of Ramo. Corona started to get worried. Corona took the trail to the south part of the island where she heard distant barking. She saw Ramo and knew he was dead. Corona made a promise to kill the wild dogs. All of them. In Chapter 9 of the Island of the Blue Dolphins, Corona does not remember much, but she does remember the day she decided to burn her village to the ground and leave nothing to mark Galisat. And later that day, she went out to find a suitable new home, and soon she did. There was a large boulder in a cove, sheltered by the wind and rain. There was also a place to get water not far away. In other words, it was perfect. That night, Corona slept on the rock. It was very uneven, and the top of the rock bothered her. So the next day, she gathered some kelp as a cushion for it. And the next time Karna thought about making weapons, she decided she would the next day. And she made herself a bow and arrow. It was very hard, but she did it.
In Chapter 10 of Island of the Blue Dolphins, Karana said that winter has ended and it's now summer. Summer is a beautiful time on the island. Karana saw birds, fish, whales, and wild dogs. Karana realizes that she was all alone and she had to build a shelter with what she has. Before she does, Karana decides that she will go on a canoe and catch some fish. Lucky for Karana, there was no wind and dolphins were by her. On her way home, later that night, Karana found a rock and was too tired to think about the wild dogs and fell asleep.
In Chapter 11, Island of the Blue Dolphins, Karana wakes up from her nap. She feels strange about the island, so she does not want to leave until the white men come back. Since Karana is staying here for a while, she has to find a place to live. 1, she can live near the destroyed village, or 2, she can live in a cave a couple miles west. Karana eventually ends up living near the destroyed village. In Chapter 12 of Island of the Dolphins, one summer, many whale bones washed up on the sandspit and left Gallasat full of bones. Now there are only some. Karana thought she could use the washed-up whale bones, so she picked them up and carried the bones to the headland. She finally got to the headland. She put the whale bones into the earth and faced them outward, so animals can't climb on the top. Then Karana dug a hole so she can crawl in and out. Then on the outside, she put a mat woven with brush. She built the fence first so she could be protected by the wild dogs. There is a lagoon with 2 gods, Tumuat and Mooncat. Tumuat wished people to die, and Mooncat did not. Tumuat left and took his valuables to the underworld.
In Chapter 13 of Island and the Blue Dolphins, Karana wants to hunt the sea elephant for their teeth to make a spear. Karana was not successful. Karana wants to use her bow and arrows to kill a sea elephant. Karana questioned whether the bow and arrows would break because Karana was a woman. Karana chose a sea elephant to kill.
In Chapter 14 of Island of the Blue Dolphins, Karana, the girl with the long black hair, had a minor injury on her leg after coming home. Then she realized she had no food or water, so she went out dragging herself to the ravine. When she got there, she took her basket and filled it up with water, but noticed that the wild pack of dogs had followed her by the trace of her footsteps.
On Chapter 15, there had been wild dogs on the island of the Blue Dolphins. Karana had already killed 5 of the wild dogs' pack, but there were many. The young wild dogs are wilder than the old ones. She did not hope to kill more than 5 of them because Karana did not have that many arrows. If the leader was one of them, Karana would be happy. None of the wild dogs appeared before the fire died. Then 3 wild dogs ran out and away. 7 more followed. A long time afterwards, there were still many. The leader came next. Dogs did not run away. Karana raised her bow. Fortunately, Karana did not frighten him.
In Chapter 16 of Island of the Blue Dolphins, Karana is waiting every day for the Aleuts to come to Coral Cove. Also, she's really just in survival mode. Karana was working every day on a canoe. After she finished, she thought that it was so comfortable that she slept in it. Rontu quickly learned his name. Every day, Karana and Rontu tried to catch birds. After a while, Rontu's tongue was hanging out of his mouth from trying so hard. Toward the middle of the chapter, Karana tried to spear the devilfish, but missed. She walked back to the hut with Rontu and came back prepared with lots of arrows and spears.
In Chapter 17 of Island of the Blue Dolphins, Karana was making a dress, but she was mostly focused on making a spear to catch the devilfish. The spear was made of a sea elephant tooth. Karana went to Coral Cove in spring to catch the devilfish. When she was hunting for the devilfish, she was thinking of Rontu, a wild dog that she made her friend. She was also thinking about whether or not the wild dogs would be her enemy again. She heard a weird noise. It was the wild dogs coming from the sea cliff. She ran with a bow and arrows to the sea cliff and hid in the bushes. She saw the wild dogs in a half circle around Rontu and 2 of the other wild dogs. Rontu and the 2 other wild dogs were fighting. The others were waiting to see who dies. The wild dogs charged at Rontu, and Rontu bit one of the wild dog's legs and broke it. In Chapter 18 of Island of the Blue Dolphins, Karana used the natural resources to make her clothing. Karana found birds and tamed them. Karana also used the birds' feathers to make her skirt. Karana clipped the birds' wings because so the birds won't fly away. Also, the birds learned to take food out of Karana's hands. Karana made sandals. When she made her sandals, Karana would put on her skirt and sandals and walk from the cliff with Ronto. In Chapter 19 of Island of the Blue Dolphins, Karana was so empowered to catch the devilfish because she didn't have much food. All she had to eat were her main food, abalones. After finding it was in the shallow water, she took her spear and stabbed at the devilfish, and black filled the ocean water. She thought she had captured her prey. However, it was still moving. Rontu grabbed a hold of it with his teeth. Rontu ended up killing the devilfish. Karana went back home with her new meal.
In Chapter 20 of Island of the Blue Dolphins, Karana and Rontu were collecting fresh abalones. They were having trouble keeping them away from the gulls. Karana made us a new net to catch fish. They found a cave to hide from the alutes. Karana and Rontu are going to stay in the cave until the alutes go away.
In Chapter 21 of Island of the Blue Dolphins, Karana sees a ship on the horizon with red flags. She packs up her things and makes her home look abandoned. She wonders where to go and remembers that there is a cave in the ravine. Once she arrives at the cave, she begins to finish making her comb-out feather skirt. She walks outside to admire the beauty of the skirt. The skirt is glossy black and green. She puts it against her waist and sways it around. Then she hears footsteps. She grabs her spear and Rontu begins to growl. The girl's name was Tutok. She had long hair. Tutok asked if there was a cave, if that was her cave. She shook her head no. A few hours later, at dark, Karana packed up her things and began to walk away. She looked back, and on the step was a black rock on a necklace of which she had never seen before. In Chapter 22 of Island of the Blue Dolphins, Karana did not take the necklace off of the rock. She slept on the headland where she left her stuff. She went back to the ravine and hid. She could see the mouth of the cave where she had hid. The sun rose, and Karana could see that the necklace was lying on the rock still. She stayed there all morning. Karana heard the girl walking in the brush. Then she thanked Tutok for the oval-shaped pearl necklace. They talked for a while. Many times she came back to the cave. One day, she did not return. Karana waited a while, but she never came. She went to the headland, and the ship was sailing off. Karana felt very lonely.
Chapter 23 of Island of the Blue Dolphins. When the alutes left, they left a bunch of wounded otters. Then Karana, the girl with the long black hair, found an otter that was still alive, but had a big scar on his back. Karana decides to take the otter to the tide pools where the otter can heal. Karana decides to name the otter Monani, which means little boy with large eyes. Every day, Karana would feed the otter live fish and help him heal. She did not make a medicine because Monani is lying in the salt water, and salt water helps with scars. Karana goes back to her house where most things were not damaged except for the fence. Karana got to that right away. Karana caught abalone because most of the abalone got stolen from the alutes.
In Chapter 24 of Island of the Blue Dolphins, it's spring again, and Karana's bird friends, Tanner and Luai, built a nest out of twigs and Rontu's fur. After they built the nest, they had babies. Karana's friend finds a baby seagull with a broken leg and helps it by wrapping 2 sticks around its leg with sinew. One day, while Karana is gathering abalone, she spots a herd of otter, and one follows her. She soon discovers it was Monani, and she saw her babies, and then found out Monani was a girl, so she changed the otter's name to Wanani, which means girl with large eyes.
In Chapter 25 of Island of the Blue Dolphin, Karana feels very alone. She watches for the alutes, but they didn't return. Karana went to the lair where the wild dogs once lived and found Rontu suffering at the back of the cave. She stayed with Rontu all night. She did everything she could. After all she had done to help him, Karana begins to remember memories of Rontu. Karana ends up digging a hole and burying Rontu.
Get a rhythm.
In Chapter 26 of Island of the Blue Dolphins, Karana did not leave the hut much. The only time she did was to hunt for food and drink water at the spring. Rontu was gone by that time, and that winter had the worst storms. She had caught many wild dogs, but not the one with the yellow eyes. Because she was afraid to handle them, she was forced to let them free.
In chapter 27 of Island of the Blue Dolphins, Karana and Rontu are relieved that the stormy weather had passed the Island of the Blue Dolphins for now. Then Karana started to notice that the water was getting rough. Karana and the wild dog finally felt the earthquake, which caused a tsunami. They saw kelp, fish, and water washed against the shore.
Chapter 28 of the Island of the Blue Dolphins. After the storm, Karana's canoe fell apart, so Karana had to make a new one. While Karana was making a new canoe, she picked up some pieces from the old canoe to make the new one. Karana was looking for dry seaweed for her canoe. Karana was holding dry seaweed and going to the canoe she was making. Karana saw a ship. She dropped the seaweed and went hiding in the bushes if they were hunters or looking for Karana. One man got off the ship and went to the headland and saw Karana's fire she was making. And the man shouted if there was someone living on the island, but Karana stayed silent. When Karana heard the man stop calling, Karana ran to the ship, but Karana saw the trail that the man left, and it began to rain. Karana started as the ship leaves, but the wind was too strong. Karana sat and stared at the ship until it disappeared.
In chapter 29 of Island of the Blue Dolphins, after 2 years went by, the white man's ship returned to the Island of the Blue Dolphins. Karana saw the ship from the cliff, hoping she felt happy, hoping she was going to leave the island. The 3 men got off the ship and followed the smoke from the last fire Karana had made. It was still burning. The white men found Karana and brought her to their ship. Karana left behind everything except her otter cape and Rontu and the 2 birds she befriended. In the end, Karana was finally leaving the island where she spent so many lonely days.